Sanita, wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's delightful to be here.
So, someone who's tuning in right now and who's a bit curious around this topic of being a resilient leader, what are they going to gain from listening to our conversation in the next half an hour?
I think the main message that I will share is that in order to become more resilient, we need to first become more self aware. Because when we are becoming self aware, we can regulate our emotions, we can not react, but actually respond to the others. And in the process, we can also become more resilient.
Yes, I think self awareness is a great place to start when it comes to resilience. And I'm also curious because I know you have 2 decades of experience in different leadership roles. What have you found to be the most underestimated but the most useful skill needed as a leader?
I think it's not just me, but there's so much research around empathy. And obviously, that's part of emotional intelligence, subset of skills, and as is self awareness as well. And especially in today's environment, that is so much changing all the time. I don't think we need to address all the changes that are happening around us. I think we can barely manage. I think there's even studies that 67% of leaders are saying they can't keep up with the change that's happening in our environments. People, the ones who we lead, truly expect us to lead them through this change. And to lead through the change, we need to have empathy. We need to have better connection. We need to really understand how someone's feel and then how we can support them. So I think empathy is coming up as probably one of the top skills.
You said right now that 67% of leaders, I'd almost say maybe 100%, struggle to keep up with change. What are certain tools, habits that they can put in place to better navigate change?
That's a very good question. And I think that's where the resilience comes in, because resilience is literally your ability to bounce back through challenges and setbacks. However, I think when it comes to resilience, there is this old way or old notion of what resilience is. And it's like, I'm this iron, made from iron steel leader, and I just march through no matter what. I push through until I collapse. And that's the resilience. And I think in our modern more world and leadership, the notion of resilience is very much changing. It's about actually setting the right boundaries. It's about knowing yourself well. It's also about self-care and well-being of ourselves and others. And then we are still strong, but we are also able to be emotional. We are also able to be vulnerable. We are also able to be human, and we still do our work on a very high quality. So I think that's kind of how I see resilience and how I believe leaders can navigate change better.
So, combining this ability to push through, but with emotional intelligence and self care, and not just being this iron person, totally oblivious to any feeling and emotion. I feel this is something that is often forgotten when it comes to resilience and perseverance, which is, can we feel our emotions and be vulnerable, as you mentioned, along the journey? And I think it's because sometimes we're afraid that if we feel our emotions as we persevere, they might get in the way. We might feel those doubts or those fears or that uncertainty coming in, and this might block our perseverance. So, how have you supported your clients who are maybe going through a phase of self doubt or going through a phase of discouragement to persevere, but without repressing those emotions?
I think there are a couple of things, and one thing that immediately comes to my mind is this thing about choice. Because when we have a choice, when we feel we have a choice, we are able to make, we have an agency, right? Because choice in a way is agency. We are able to make better decisions, and we are also able to make those decisions that serve us. So that's one. And I think the second is hope. Hope is very much underestimated. But when we see hope in the future, or when we can give the hope to the others, we can find that strength internally, because we know that, okay, I just go through this period and there will be, brighter side of the life. The sun will shine at me. So I think that that notion of hope, and hope is something we can actually nurture in ourselves. It's our ability to look positively at life. And it's not the false positivism, that we're just going to jump up and down no matter what happens to us, and we're just going to be positive. But it's addressing the challenges, but still seeing the positive into what is happening, and still believing that after I go through this challenging period, there is hope, there is better future for me, which then gives me more agency to go through it.
This is beautifully put, and it reminds me of the difference between toxic positivity, which is when we just color everything pink and say everything is fine, versus optimism, which is where we see the challenges for what they are, but we believe in the future possibilities of future opportunities. I think this notion of hope is so fundamental when we're going through low stages. And I know probably your case also, Sanita. I work with a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, and we all know it can be a bit of a roller coaster ride. And so, in those lows, seeing that there's a future possibilities, that there are future opportunities, that things are going to turn around really helps this perseverance. But if you're going through a low phase and it all looks black afterwards and uncertain and scary and empty, then it's very hard to shift our mindset and continue to persevere. So I'd be curious to hear for someone who's maybe listening to this right now and maybe their business is really stagnating and they're not seeing this amazing outcome in the future, how can they start to nurture this vision and shift into seeing more possibilities and abundance in the future?
I think that's a very good point that you said. And I think there is a lot to do with allowing ourselves to fail and allowing ourselves to experiment. Because often we don't see possibilities if we don't have anything in pipeline. You mentioned entrepreneurs, right? We potentially tried something and something failed, and we are in this very dark phase and we don't know how to get out of it. If we accept that failure is just part of entrepreneurship, and maybe we will fail 10 times and 11th we will succeed, then we are allowing ourselves this choice again, right? The agency to fail more. And we can start experiment. And if we have this positive optimism that you also mentioned, we can potentially launch 10 different small experiments. And, 4 of them might succeed, and one could be like a big hit, and 9 of them might fail. But once we start launching and doing those small things and we start seeing some progress, even a small progress, somebody responded, somebody bought into us, somebody wanted to collaborate, and we give ourselves some credit, pat on the back. Okay, that is great, I did it well. Then we start again building that agency in ourselves to be able to go through this period. So I think it's allowing ourselves to fail, keep going at it, and also allowing us just experiment.
This notion of failure is something that comes up a lot, this fear of failure, especially with high achieving people, business owners, which is most of the people I work with are very high achievers, and high achievers do not like failing. And even though we can say failure is lessons learned and experimenting, there is this inner blockage, this mindset of they take it at heart and see failure as something personal, as if they are less worthy because they haven't succeeded. So I'm wondering, knowing what you know and what you've just shared around failure, how do you help people to shift this perspective and so they can finally see it as experimenting and they can be okay with this idea of failure and not take it as a personal failure?
Yeah, that's and I noticed that the same, and I think that has a lot to do with others, right? Because the failure, I mean, it's not, if somebody fails, when they really ask themselves question, how much does it matter to me? Often it doesn't matter to them that much. They are actually fine with that. What matters to them is that others are not fine with that, that their partner or their colleague or their co-worker, whoever is not fine with that, and they fear more the judgment that comes from the others related to that failure. So it's this critique or feedback that we are fearing from the others. And I think there are 2 ways how we can shift. One, for the feedback specifically, we could start looking at the feedback. It's a data point, but it's not just a data point about ourselves. It's also a data point about the other person. Because when somebody provides us feedback, it tells a lot about them. Sometimes it tells more about them than it actually tells about us. So if they are, giving us the feedback that we failed and how and why and what, that probably also tells us that they would not love to like to even start because they are afraid to fail. So that potentially tells more about them. So I think there is this notion around the feedback about what others are thinking, and when we kind of tune out of what others think and we tune in what actually matters to us and what is our mission and how we like to serve the world, then I think we just see this as a part of experimentation. We want to serve the world, we have the purpose, we tried something, we failed, we're going to try again and do it differently.
This is resilience in a nutshell, this ability to bounce back, bounce back in spite of failure. It is such a powerful ability to be resilient. I often feel that if all we have is resilience, inner trust, and that inner guidance to lead a purpose driven life and career, that's it really. I mean, once we have that, it's like you say, you try again, you do it a different way, you experiment, you learn. Something is a great success, something's a terrible failure, you do again, and it doesn't become so hard. I often feel that this fear of failure or this fear of rejection or this notion of when we don't succeed in something, when that feels so heavy, then it's very hard to be resilient because each and every no becomes a mountain. And I was speaking with an entrepreneur the other day who said, "But so how do you manage when you get no's?" And I'm thinking, but if you don't know how to take no's lightly, then it's going to feel very difficult. But it can also just feel like, okay, that wasn't quite aligned. That maybe this will work better, and seeing it differently. I often think of rejection as redirection, and that really helps my mindset in that perspective. Also, I've noticed something listening to different entrepreneurs and business owners who have led a very successful, or at least financially successful business. And I noticed at one point that they were the most resilient. They were the ones who would give these stories, and I'm sure you've heard them too, Sanita, of thousands of VCs toned them down, or good co-founders, or years and years working in whatever someone's flat or something. And you think, yeah, it's easy to hear the story once there's success and think, oh, whatever. But that was 8 years. I think Notion, it took them 8 years to get it off the ground, I think. Those 8 years, a long 8 years. And once something is a huge success, we forget about that. So this resilience is really key. I'm curious to hear what are your thoughts around, I suppose, resilience and success, how the most successful, at least in terms of business growth and finance, but also hopefully in terms of personal fulfillment, how success and resilience are correlated.
Absolutely. And I love that you just mentioned this about overnight success, because I think, especially these days, we see everything on social media and everything just looks like overnight success. And I really believe there's no such thing as overnight success, right? Because there really isn't. Behind every overnight success, there's so much hard work, there's so much learning, there's so much, dealing with the internal challenges, external challenges, and so forth. Actually, my story with resilience started when I was a student, because when I was a student, I did this crazy summer job, which is really crazy. I used to sell books door to door in the US. And that's truly a lesson in resilience, because you are knocking on people's doors trying to sell them educational books. It wasn't any other books, it was educational, but it's all, and then you're just learning that success is a number game. That if you're going to knock on enough people's doors, somebody will open, somebody will be interested, somebody will buy those books from you day in, day out, week after week. You just focus on your goal, and you just keep knocking on those doors. And that was a summer job that I did actually for 4 years. All the years while I was a student, that is how I earned my college fees and paid for my education. So that was a great learning in communication, in resilience, in actually business fundamentals and managing teams, because later I was managing teams as well. And I think those lessons probably have stayed with me, because I realized that even now when I run my business, it is a numbers game, right? If you connect with enough people, somebody will respond, somebody will say no. It doesn't matter. You just keep going and focusing on what's the message you want to share with the world. So that's in terms of the entrepreneurship, and I think some great ways. Some people wait tables, some people do all kind of jobs that essentially help you to curate those qualities in yourself that just demonstrates in action through real life examples that we do something and we get rejected, we get up, we do it again, and eventually we succeed. And that gives you self assurance that in all those situations I can succeed. And the other thing, I think many people who do sports or some kind of endurance sports or team sports or anything like that, they also learn the same lessons, because in sports, sometimes you succeed, sometimes you fail, but you just keep training and keep doing your best until you become stronger. When you become stronger, you know that you will succeed. I climb mountains. That's something I do. And I'm actually training now to go to Aconcagua over the New Year's. And of course, I don't know will I get to the summit or not. It's the highest mountain I have ever climbed in my life. But all I can do is every day, unless I'm sick or something, I can go to the gym. I can go to cycle. I can go do my stairmasters and hikes on the weekend, and I can just prepare myself to my very best ability. And then, of course, on a mountain, I'll have to solve challenges. I'll have to deal with different weather. I might be, knocked down. I might need to get up again, but I'll just keep going and hope to reach that goal.
There's definitely a direct link between exercise and running a business, but resilience in general. And I always love this notion of hormetic stressors. So the idea that if we, for instance, take cold showers, which I'm a big fan of, and some people do also ice baths, or exercising, they help you build your resilience physically and therefore also mentally, because I love how we separate the body and the mind, like they're two separate entities in the world. Obviously they're one and only together. So by training physical resilience, it trains mental resilience. And I noticed that one of your most recent posts was around we can't pour from an empty cup. And so there's this notion of the importance of well-being. So could you say a few words on this notion of the importance of well-being when it comes to fostering our own resilience?
Absolutely, that's probably one of my favorite topics, because well-being is just so important, and I'm so glad that there is more and more research around it and data on even connection to leadership, connection to engagement, connection to profitability. We know now that when people feel well in organizations as well, they are more productive. The organization is more profitable. When the leaders take care of their own well-being, they are becoming better leaders. So there's so much data. I'm so happy it's coming through. But on personal level, again, sleep. So basic. I don't know how many people go to sleep so late. They have to get up early. They don't get enough sleep. And there's so much research around sleep. We know that when we are not slept, we cannot perform to our best. Our cognitive abilities are not at the highest. We are more irritable. We don't have enough patience. Our performance goes down. Our productivity goes down. So it's so important. So, I go to sleep very early and very protective of my sleep. And I get up early as well. So that's a very basic one. Exercise as well. We know so many mental cognitive benefits that come from regular exercise beyond just being strong and looking good. And what we eat, how much alcohol we consume, all these things are for our well-being. And I think especially in leadership and entrepreneurship, in our environments where there's so much coming our way every day, that everyday stressors, the changes, if we don't take care of ourselves, it's like a core of us is really strong. We are not able to deal with the challenges that come our way. We are not able to serve others. We are not able to be our best parents, leaders, friends, whoever. So it starts with ourselves. And I think many people confuse this idea that if I take care of myself, I'm selfish. You're actually not selfish. When you take care of yourself first and you ensure that you feel well and you're strong, you are going to be better at taking care of the others as well. So you're actually opposite of selfish.
Absolutely. I also wanted to add to the well-being part the importance of socializing, because there was a time I was very mindful of my nutrition, exercise, sleep, meditation. I had my 9 hours of sleep. I worked out every single day. I ate healthily. I meditated every morning. Still sort of do all of these things. And yet I was feeling a bit empty inside. And as a highly extroverted person, and this was obviously around the COVID period, it was in 2021, I think, I really needed to socialize in person. So I was socializing online, like we're doing now, but I was in a co-working space. So I wasn't working from home, but a co-working space, so wasn't very dynamic in terms of social interactions. And I started to plan in daily or weekly lunches with friends, and my energy and my business and everything took off. And I realized that this is a fundamental part of well-being. So absolutely the sleep, exercise, nutrition, 200%. I would add meditation to that. Amazing for sure, but also socializing. And I think this is so important because so many people are working from home. And if you're a business owner, or maybe you're a solopreneur and you're on your own at home all day, whew. See, I couldn't even pronounce it properly. That's how much I feel for people like this. And for me, one of my core priorities is having a co-working space I go to every day, seeing friends at the weekend, socializing. And I think this is equally valid for people who are more introverted. We also need socializing. They just need different balance of socializing. What are your thoughts around social interaction, especially nowadays after the sort of 2020 phase? I feel things are a bit different now in terms of social interactions.
I think you just really mentioned, I mean, it's incredibly important. There was the Harvard happiness study, right? The longest study around the subject, which truly found that even to longevity and our health and everything, social aspect community is actually the most important thing. And it leads me a little bit to the support networks, because when we meet with our friends, when we are social, we are surrounded by people who are in support networks. And coming back to the subject of resilience and change, sometimes I think we underappreciate how important support networks are in our ability to navigate change. Whether it's in our partner or family or our best friends or a community that we find we can relate to and we are in frequent touch with, those support networks are just so strong, because we can be resilient, we can be, all the willpower, all the strengths, but sometimes we just need someone else to cheer us up, to pat on our back, to say we are doing well, or just to have an honest conversation, human honest conversation. So community support networks, I'm so big on communities. I'm involved in quite a few communities and on different subjects, and I could just see how connecting, going an event, having a conversation literally cheers me up, cheers others up, and also just adds so much more color to our lives.
Yes, it adds color to our lives. That's very well said. I'm very curious to hear about your habits, your routine. So we've spoken about exercising and climbing, and which is fantastic. What a great goal! And socializing, going to networks events. So all these well-being routines. But what are some of the two, three things that you practice on a daily or weekly basis that specifically help you in those hard moments, that help you to deal with the challenging phases? Because once more, that's what resilience is all about. So how do you nurture yourself on top of all the well-being practices in order to manage challenging circumstances?
So I think this coming back to self-awareness, because for everyone it's different, right? And the more self-aware we are, the more we know how we can also support ourselves and help ourselves. And for me, I think it's three. One is journaling or writing. I love to write. That's usually the first thing I do in the morning. I write. And then sometimes they become LinkedIn posts, sometimes that becomes something else. But just writing helps me a lot to kind of clarify my thoughts. Then I think the second is again being surrounded by people who are really important, and consciously and very mindfully making the time in our very busy agendas and schedules, even if it's 1 hour, even if it's whatever the time is, but to be with those people who give us the positive energy. Because that exchange of energy can literally boost us up so much. I think that's the second, and the third for me is being in the nature. I love outdoors. Of course, I live in Dubai. It's not always so easy, but whenever I can be in the nature, and there's so many studies. I think there was a Stanford study as well that showed that 90 minutes walk in the nature can boost our productivity, mood, everything. Just 90 minutes, right? So trying to be in nature as much as I can over the weekend or even evening walk, that helps me so much.
Yes, it's funny how some things sometimes sound so basic because we've heard them over and over again, such as journaling and nature. but they're basic for a reason because they really work. There's a reason why people talk about nature over and over again and
Exactly.
journaling. I also practiced for a while the morning pages that Julia Cameron talks about in The Artist's Way. And being in nature, I remember a time where I was feeling particularly stressed. And I live in Sweden, so there's a lot of forests and nature. And I went in the weekend for a hike, and I remember entering the forest and instantly, within seconds, feeling my whole nervous system calm down. Like, it was like a magic pill. And I thought, why don't I do this all the time? It just calmed me so fast. You know, we think of therapists, which is great, and massages, which are great, and seeing friends, which is fantastic, and all of these different things, but also just go into the forest or go for a long walk or go to the mountains or swim in the sea, and it's like we breathe again. We also weren't built, I think, to be in environments that are so disconnected from nature, depending on where we're based, when we're in towns. And so I feel that every time we go back to nature, it calms down our whole nervous system and our body, and we can think more clearly. And so that is a fundamental for a reason.
Absolutely. I always been as much in nature as I can, and cycling or hiking or paddleboarding, or I mean, whatever that looks like for me, that's an absolute amazing way to recharge, to think, to gain energy, and yeah, just feel better.
So, for someone who's listening to this interview right now and this episode, what would you recommend them to do so that they could tune in to their own inner resilience? What would be your main piece of advice to support someone to tune in to their own inner resilience?
I think we mentioned a couple things, but again, it comes to creating better self-awareness. And Dr. Tasha Urich, who has studied self-awareness for years, she said that 90% of us think we are self-aware, but in reality, only 10 to 15% of people are. So that really means that we are less self-aware than we believe we are. And increasing our self-awareness helps us understand what are those things that we can do, because those things will be different for everyone. So I cannot, give like a blanket advice on how we become more resilient, because when we know ourselves better, we will find out how we can be. So anything that increases self-awareness, reflection, getting feedback, doing assessments, even emotional intelligence assessment, um, coach therapy, anything, reflecting on responses that we get, reflecting on events that happens around us, how was our response to them, what were other inputs, what was the process, what was the outcome. Just becoming more self-aware, we will find the ways how we can respond better to things that happen around us. So I would suggest that as a starting point.
Yes, it's definitely not everything fits into one box. And I would agree that the best place to start would be to start to ask ourselves in challenging moments, what has helped us? What have we done in the past? What are some of the habits that don't serve us? What are some of the patterns that keep coming up, like this fear of failure, for instance, etc., etc.? And then we find our own tools, our own habits that work best for us, and the patterns that we want to leave and break out of. And through this self awareness, we can create that transformation. Sanita, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. It's such a fascinating topic, going into the importance of resilience, the link to well being, how it's connected to success, how as a leader we can thrive by being more resilient. Thank you for the time today for the conversation.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks for having me.